Proceeding to the next session, we've got a very interesting session, which is the curated insights of the BCI Global Cyber Resilience Survey. BCI, the Business Continuity Institute, is our knowledge partner. They have been supporting us through and through the moment we started our NASSCOM Business Excellence Initiative. And to lead this curated insights discussion, we've got the curator here. For a change, I've named him the curator because these are the curated insights. We've got Vikrant Varshney, who is the chairman of the BCI Hyderabad Forum. He is also the Chief Risk Officer and Managing Partner, Risk Resources. And joining him on the stage are Ratna Pawan, Global Head Security Risk, GSCs and Technology, HSBC. Ratna, may I request you to join on the stage, please? Sanjay Mathur, Managing Director and Global Lead for Business Continuity Management, Accenture. Sumit Dhar, Senior Director and Head of Information Security and Risk Management, Edgeverve, Infosys. And Sai Sundaram, Executive Director, Group Sourcing, UBS. Gentlemen, the stage is all yours for the next 40 minutes. Thank you.
Being trouble by the time they are picking up the slides. Good afternoon. My name is Vikrant Varshney. Some of you would have seen us participating in the previous sessions which we had with NASSCOMs on the risk mitigation series. Glad that I'm seeing few faces again in the room. We've had sessions, as Shrikant highlighted, initially in business continuity domain, then we did third-party risk management, then governance, risk and compliance, and this is focusing on cyber resilience and privacy. And we'll continue to have other sessions in this space, in the risk mitigation space, bringing variety of discussion. The panelists in this session are selected very well. So we've got Sumit, who's acting as information security professional, very renowned name, and also comes from an IT and a product company, so he'll obviously share his perspective from that angle. Ratna, who heads business continuity and security for a BFSI entity, so she will obviously wear the hat from both from security and continuity perspective. Sanjay, a close friend, he obviously comes from a very large IT-enabled services company, a senior executive in the continuity space. Obviously, he'll talk about ITES and continuity aspects. And Sai, an executive director for a large BFSI offshore entity, also a business leader, handles site operations, as well as the vendor relationship. So he will talk about that perspective. So we are expecting that in this panel discussion, we would have a variety of perspective. The intention that I have is, if the slides come up soon, that I talk about a survey which BCI conducted some time back, which was purely focusing on cyber resilience. And I use that as a base to start the specific discussion with this panel. So just share of hands, how many of you got to participate in the BCI Cyber Resilience Survey? Anyone in the room? 2 hands, 3 hands. Okay, that's a very small number, which means going forward we need to cascade about these surveys much more and have larger participation so that we have better responses. If security professionals, risk professionals and business leaders sitting in this room haven't got a chance to participate in survey, obviously our data could get much enricher in future if most of you or if all of you are participating. PDF file? Open in PDF, please. Sorry, some teething trouble. I cannot start unless the slides are up. Otherwise, I would have saved some time. Please bear with me. I assure you, I will not take much time. I know I'm standing between you and the game. I won't say standing between you and the lunch, but yes, lunch is after that. You know, one of the point in the survey, by the way, the survey was taken by close to 220 professionals from India. Many of them were business continuity, security and risk professional. I'll talk about the composition of participants when the slides come up. Large companies participated, BFSI, ITS company participated. So I just wanted to share the demographics so that you understand those people who have responded and what's the composition. But I think one of the first question which I wanted to highlight is, you know, it said how many cyber incidents were identified and your organization experienced in last 12 months. 46% participants said 1 to 5. So 1 to 5 cybersecurity incidents were observed by companies, and close to 8% people said 6 to 10. Now that's a large number. When we are talking about, more than 50-60% of people saying, between 1 to 10 incidents experienced in last 12 months. So I just wanted to open this to Sumit from a security professional standpoint. What could be the reason for, increasing incidents, and does this number match with what you see, in real time, and your views, please?
Sure. I think the first thing that we all need to understand is cybersecurity is inherently hard. It's not an easy topic. It's not something you can manage easily. Now, the reason why you see so many incidents and these numbers are just going up is what I like to call the asymmetry between defenders and the attackers. What I mean over here is, as a defender, you have to defend every server, every network component, every operating system, every database. One miss on your side is all that an attacker needs. So there is a huge amount of asymmetry, and that's a real reason why we see so many attacks. Another thing, and we do have to give credit to the attackers, is for a very simple reason: they have got sophisticated, they are intelligent, they know their stuff, and their capabilities are really good. The last point I would say when it comes to increase in attacks is because almost everything today is connected. I don't know how many of you read it recently, but there was an incident where a casino almost got hacked via a phishing tank that was connected to the internet. So these kind of situations will lead to more and more attacks in the future. And the last point that goes without saying is it's lucrative. For the attackers, we heard some numbers in the previous presentations: 90 million from the Swift attack in Bangladesh, 100,000 for one WannaCry. So it is very lucrative. And because of that, because of the opportunities that these incidents provide to the attackers, we will continue to see much more in the near future.
Okay, thank you. So my slides are up. So I'll take a pause back, go back to show, the 69 countries participated in the survey. What we are showing you is the slice of what was the data for India. 221 organizations from India participated, and NASSCOM was a partner in promoting this. That's why we had a large number this time, and we'll continue to look for more people participating. And the broad three categories were that, we spoke about cyber incidents in 12 months. That was the first one. The driver of disruption was social engineering, malware, and spear phishing. Thankfully, this was a survey which happened before ransomware became too big. So there are people who have still said ransomware, but at least the section was not predominantly focusing only on ransomware. And Indian organization thankfully outperformed the global average in terms of their arrangements in dealing with that situation. So at least that's a positive sign. And a lot of that could be because we had large companies from India participating, whether they are in offshoring domain or in ITES, IT services, IT companies, which obviously have better controls. 2-3 slides, I'll go and then I'll start the discussion. This is just a breakdown of industries. So as you can see, large portion of the companies which participated, 80%, close to 80% of responses came from IT, ITES, BFSI, and professional services company, which also, form the large employer these days in the market as well. Breakdown by number of employees. So if you see, 73% of the respondents were large and very large organizations. If you see the number of, the employees which are shown in the data, they were at least 5,000 to 1 lakh kind of an employee database company, people who responded. So just these numbers are important because when you will look at some of the responses, you will understand what kind of companies, responded to the survey. Approximate half of the companies are $1 billion plus companies. So we are talking about large organizations, definitely. So this was a question where we started about cyber disruption, and we heard Sumit's view also that we are talking about at least 1 to 5 and 6 to 10 kind of incidents happening in last 12 months, which is increasing and alarming. This is about the drivers of disruption, and we are seeing definitely the phishing and social engineering coming up in the highest category. Just the question back to you again, Sumit, from the perspective of, seeing this data. Sorry, you guys may not be able to see some of it, but obviously the largest one is phishing social malware. And the two which are there in ransomware or denial of service, which could be disruptive in nature, right? So there is an angle on reputation and there is an angle on continuity, and we heard some of that in the earlier presentation. Do you see more increasing incidents which are getting disruptive in nature? Because in last couple of years, we were seeing more reputational incidents, and now slowly we are graduating to disruptive. So what's driving it?
I think it's all driven by money. If you look at it, ransomware results in direct money going to the attacker. If you look at something where they have stolen credentials from, let's say, Yahoo, they still have to crack those encrypted passwords, find a buyer who's willing to purchase those kind of credentials. That's a tough game for them. It takes time, it takes effort, and they need to find the right buyer for it. But things like ransomware or a distributed denial of service attack, they can directly reach out to the impacted organization and say, hey, pay up or else, right? So they are cutting out the intermediaries, they are directly reaching out to their victims and getting paid for it. Given that financially this is going to be more lucrative for the attackers, I'm sure we will continue to see more of these. And the other thing that we need to keep in mind, ransomware, we still can do something, we can try and prevent it. But for a distributed denial of service attack, there's very little you can do to prevent, you can only react to it, right? So from an attacker's perspective, it's a wonderful situation to be in. You can't do anything against a DDoS attacker has launched. The only thing you can do is, as someone said, 24 hours, the e-commerce site was down. Probably they ended up paying, right? So that's the reason why I think we'll see more of these disruptive attacks rather than a pure reputational impact attack.
Sure. And I'll ask a question to Ratna, considering your responsibility is slightly wider than the two function. There is obviously an angle of insider threat also, which could lead to it or which could trigger more panic situation. Anything specific which companies are doing to deal with the insider threat now with the changing environment?
Definitely, and I think it's, in people-centric organizations, and here we are talking about, managing about 50 to 70,000, people in the organization. I think it's awareness, awareness, and awareness. Okay, I think the level of awareness that we are now kind of building in is very high. The frequency has gone up. So earlier, if there was something that we were sending out to our people once in 3 months, we have now made that monthly. We have increased the number of penetration testing, because awareness is one thing, but then to see whether that awareness is really working to actually send out false phishing kind of emails and seeing how much percentage of our staff really click on it and stuff like that is also important. So yes, it is a combination of awareness, of penetration, of a top-down seriousness being built into the organization. The various external events like WannaCry, NotPetya, whatever you call it, is also helping us create that awareness, because it's no more something that you are trying to build in, nothing that people are not aware of. There's a lot of media attention as well. So yes, Vikrant, to answer your question, it's awareness and the penetration and ensuring that we get the stats right on it.
Sure, thank you. This is a slide which talks about source of identification of the incident, and large portion of it, I mean, from the eyes of the respondent, they still say that I get to know it from IT department, which is okay. IT department obviously is the front end of some of it. It could be information security department, it could be IT security department for someone else. There is also a virus notification player which we talked about, but I think what's interesting, which catches my eye, is that people say I get to know about it when there is a website failure, or when customer is notifying me, or when the supplier is notifying it to me. Now, that's a question which I will still go back, and because looking at the number, Sumit, again back to you, is this too reactive? When companies themselves cannot identify and they get to know it from others about it, and are we really moving towards complex situation when our own identification fails around it?
In fact, if I go to the DBIR report that's released by Verizon, these numbers look very different. Over there, majority of the incidents are reported by third parties, right? Detecting incidents, I started off by saying security is hard. Detecting incidents is harder. It's like trying to find a needle in a burning haystack,
sure,
right? What you have today is systems that are creating tons of logs. You have SIEM systems which will collect, collate, analyze, etc. But it still remains a problem with the volume of logs that you're dealing with. I wouldn't blame if the IT is unable to find it, because the volumes that we are talking about, I was talking to a vendor for a SIEM deployment, and he said the lowest we start is with 500 events per second, right? So that's the volume that we are talking about. Detecting and false positives are very high for almost every system. No matter which vendor you go with, false positives are high. So there's not much that can happen over here unless there is a drastic transformation, a drastic product which comes out with much lower false positives and a better way to deal with logs. Then yes, there could be an approach where we get better response. But response to a crisis will always be reactive. You can do only so much to prevent it. Sure. Like we saw in the previous presentation, someone said there are two kinds of companies, those that have been hacked and those are yet to be hacked. I'll change it to those that don't know they have been hacked.
I agree.
So a lot of the responses will be reactive, and what we need to do is not just strengthen prevention, that's a given, but strengthen the way we respond. You know, speed, effectiveness, that needs to be strengthened.
Sure, and we'll come to that. So the next slide which I have is about, you know, disruption and cost of disruption. And if you see, 80% of the organization reported that loss were still less than £50,000. This is a data since came from European agency. They still think about pound and we think about dollars, which is okay, but I think the number is still reasonable. But 4% of the Indian organization lost at least £1 million during the same period and incident. So that's a larger number. But I still, you know, want to, let's say, ask this question to Sanjay. Sanjay, what's your view on these numbers? One, do you see them correlated with reality? And do people really report the right number?
I don't agree with what numbers come in, because I think so the numbers are much larger. There could be various reasons for it. One is probably people are not aware of the full impact as such, and even the numbers are looking pretty low, because you are being attacked every time, every other day. You don't know about it. That's all. So the realization has to be far greater, and the impact has to be done. And I think so everybody should use this number, even if they're not reporting in the survey. They should use the right numbers and take it to the board, and use that as a catalyst to make the change and the investment that is required.
So that's why the question is more important, because if we don't respond correct numbers in the survey, or we don't report it, you know, the response that you would get from your board is that this is still insignificant loss, and hence why should I worry and why should I spend money more on preventive side, on controlling side. So if right people are responding to surveys, sometime this would become a good data point for you to take it back to your board for sponsoring your project which is needed. So if you're under-reporting it, or if you don't know that there is an impact, probably you need to do more about it. Is a question again back to you, considering we're talking about impact. If there is a ransomware, would people actually openly accept that I paid ransom and then record it as an incident?
It depends, basically, how exposed are you, or what has happened. The primary phase, the first reaction would be to curtail it or contain it. Until unless it's in the media, then you react to it, basically, right? So every organization is protecting their reputation, and there would be some level of concerns of what they report out and share in the wider media or public kind of stuff. So pretty much I would just say it will be a little bit of how we've contained it or curtailed it, or how we report out to the media kind of stuff.
Sure.
Vikrant, from a financial services perspective, banks especially are obligated to report to the regulator. So from a banking perspective, I don't think you have an option but to report.
And how honest we would still be to talk about ransomware reporting. I know we are very transparent nowadays to talk about data theft issue, and we go to regulator because we still get identified otherwise. But are we also openly disclosing, or at least being honest enough to report to regulator that there was a ransomware call and I paid $1 million?
I would say the incidents wouldn't be that many that we would,
because the moment you disclose it to the regulator, it's in public domain.
It's in public domain, that's for sure. That's what I'm saying. I don't think the incidents have been that many for banks to really pick and choose to say that I will report this and not report that. But if the regulator was to come to know later during any investigation or an audit, then the bank would be, for lack of choice of words, screwed. So I think it is, it would be obligatory on the bank to report, and we should.
We're having a good chat, you can see. Sai, this question to you more from the perspective because you deal a lot with the, wider organizations or supporting supply chain partners. How some of these things from a regulatory perspective you are able to enforce it to them or work through them, that you have a transparent information flowing into you as a client of those vendor organizations and still adhering to your needs.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, especially our extended supply chain, we spend a lot of time both in terms of audits but also awareness, both in terms of how they work, but also making sure they are quite aware that there is a regulatory aspect to it. Because not all organizations might appreciate that, hey, we're working for a client, but I'm not aware of what I need to disclose. So I think there is a lot of focus around making sure there is awareness. And the second aspect is we have a lot of probably quite robust control framework. I think our partners might feel that's quite onerous, but I think that's what we need to do to make sure we are capturing that and ensuring that collectively we are all safe.
Sure. This is a slide on which I'm not asking question, but just wanted to highlight. Everybody said 100% people said the most significant incident has still cost us less than 50k pound. We spoke about it. It may not still be an honest declaration, or we may not even know that there is an impact depending upon who is answering in the survey. The information is still maybe privy to few people in the company, whereas the person who has responded to the survey may still be thinking, I am not impacted. It could be any of that, but as of now the number is small. Moving forward, this is a question again on the leadership commitment to it, and large portion says that we have a good support. Obviously, it's the heightened environment, so the management support is quite obvious. But interestingly, 1/4 of the organization is still saying in India that my senior management commitment is medium to low, which is slightly surprising. And my question was to Sanjay on what's your observation on this number? What kind of companies might still be lacking support from management? And probably this could be a question which we can throw open to the audience also in this room, if they feel that their company falls into that category, and probably will learn from how to raise the awareness and their engagement.
It's very surprising actually, because I would have loved to see 100% number there. Even if they are not as far as the commitment being there, but realization on what can happen, because everybody is right now in the media, and you've seen the numbers. Basically, everybody is connected in some manner or the other, right? And with the allowing people to work, bring their own laptops and others in the stuff, mobiles are being done, and we've talked about, some of our earlier presenters talk about it. It's all a connected world, basically. So your penetration can happen from anywhere, at any time, at any given period situation, and the realization could be there. And so it's very surprising that about 25% people have said that their commitment is lower. Probably it is the realization hasn't happened, and it will take some time for them to get on board to it.
Sure.
Right? But again, from a banking, from a services organization, that 75% looks pretty okay, basically, because all of them have to be very, very focused on this.
The other thing is, this was before WannaCry and Petya days. So
Indeed.
True.
How many people in the room would still raise their hand that their management may still not be fully glued to the risk environment, especially after these incidents? Show of hand, and you don't need to feel bad about it. Okay, I see 4 or 5 hands. That's looking at, let's say, 125 people. 4 hand is still 3% number, which is much better than what at least the survey say. So if there is something which we need to do to change the perspective of your organization, lunch is a good time for all of us to speak around it. Because if you don't get support at this time, either environment would not be conducive for you to get more support in future, or you will be attacked very soon if they don't support you. So let's talk.
The only thing I would say, never lose an opportunity for a crisis to build your focus on it.
Yes.
So, yeah.
That's a bread and butter. Response time to cyber disruption. Very interesting slide. Almost 1/3 of the organization claim that they can respond, or they have responded to cyber disruption within an hour of its discovery. Now that's a question which I think Sumit is most suitable to answer, And what's your view?
This doesn't look realistic, Vikrant. I think long time back, Robert McNamara coined a phrase called fog of war. You know, things are unclear, you don't know what's happening. And when an incident really impacts a company, that's exactly what happens. It takes time to figure out what's happened, who's involved, what's the impact. So if I take a response as being the first communication that is sent out internally, it will still take the teams, and there's going to be a collaboration. There's going to be collaboration between security team, IT infrastructure team, multiple teams. 1 hour looks way too optimistic. I would say it'll still take 4 to 8 hours for people to get all the details and then send out the first communication, which I can consider as a response. Depends on what they mean by response here.
Yeah.
If response is getting teams together and saying, okay, we have had an incident, we need to look at it, possible. But if it's beyond that, this number 1 hour doesn't look realistic at all to me.
And this does not include, let's say, identification to it.
No.
Because we spoke, you know,
Yeah.
in the previous session that identification itself can take 4.5 months to 1 year.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming this is after identification. Once you've identified, how
That you are
soon
being
can you
breached.
start to at
Yeah.
least convene and start talking? But I think this question definitely can be better framed in future, where we even give better response times for people to participate and give their perspective. But do you feel, is there an angle where people feel overconfident about their preparedness, or at least they feel compelled that I should give a better view because it's going to the world?
Hard to predict that, Vikrant. To me, it looks like people have given very optimistic answers over here. It's when there is an incident, trust me, there are times in my long time back when I was working in a security operations center, we have spent 3 nights in the office trying to figure out what has happened. Right? So it takes time. It takes time.
Is this the RFP culture that I have to show everything that I am great at all practice and it doesn't matter whether the client will identify or not?
Could be, yeah.
Just a joke. Arrangements organization adopt to ensure cyber resilience. So if you see the responses, a large portion of the responses still go where people are saying that they can manage it through a dedicated team. But if you see the answer, a lot of answers are actually highlighting that having a comprehensive BCM program, compliance to the international guidelines, and having a dedicated professional focusing on this subject is the key to resolution, right? And that's where I would ask this question to Ratna first. You know, are our current frameworks, business continuity framework, which are good practice guidelines or standards, reflective of the arrangements that we need to make to deal with cyber incidents? So are they comprehensive enough to deal with it?
Not really. It's, I think it's a maturity cycle that we need to get there. While in the current environment, we do test for lack of systems or loss of systems, which in a sense a cyber attack would be. But I don't think we are there yet in terms of our businesses having manual workarounds or, you know, so conventional BCM strategies would not apply in a cyber attack. And I'm talking about a really worst case cyber attack. It could be that, you know, just one application is impacted or just one site is impacted, which is when conventional, you know, BCM and most of the organizations like ours have a very advanced and tested BCM strategy in place, which would then apply. So it would actually depend scenario to scenario. But for a worst case cyber attack where, you know, our systems are completely down and, you know, we have a large number of people or systems impacted, no.
Okay.
We have to get there.
Sanjay, you know, you manage a very large operation where, you know, even thousands of people are sitting in one building connected to an environment. How do you see this response? And would you say that we are currently ready and is the confidence meter shown correctly?
So I would just say that this survey was done before WannaCry and PTR, right? I'm sure things would have changed after that as such, because as Ratna pointed out, it depends on the impact. It depends on the situation that is affecting. What we've foreseen historically were more like denial of service or malwares, right? And now we are seeing different kind of stuff, which is like a ransomware and a significant impact to our servers or networks kind of stuff, which is down for months kind of stuff. It's the same situation. If I apply it in the same manner, we've seen enough of storms and others that have happened in a BCP situation. Chennai happened, right?
Yes, indeed.
And there are enough realization after that saying that yes, this can happen as well. So the same situation is this that we need to look at our standards, how good are they, and what maturity level you want to sustain yourself at, right? So it is upon the risk appetite and this mitigation also to an organization that needs to be done. Kind of stuff. I'll just share one example, and I know you both of you were with me, Arnab, and you basically was in the BCI forum that happened. Basically, we were talking about black swans, right? We talked about known knowns, unknown known situation, unknown as well. We saw the Japan earthquake happen, right? And there were three things that happened with that: the earthquake, the tsunami, a nuclear reactor, right? So there were three in a row that happened, right? Which led to a supply chain being disrupted big time as well, because lots of parts were not being manufactured. The same is the case with the gray rhino concept that was talked about in that forum, right?
Yeah.
Which was about the rhinos are there, basically, right? It depends on when they start attacking you, right? So I would just leave the kind of message to everybody is find your rhinos where they are, because the day they start attacking you in your system, they are there, right? You need to find out what you need to do with them and how do you maintain it, basically. So,
Great perspective. Yeah, very good. Sai, a question, because this says dedicated BCM team working on cyber resilience issue. I'm just twisting the response slightly differently. While there might be a, dedicated BCM professionals inside, do you also have a dedicated team which looks at the vendor organizations and their preparedness and specifically focusing on them, or you have somebody which is looking internally in their own organization as well as in the vendor organization? How does it work for you?
So as part of a quarterly audit, we tend to cover some of these elements with our partners. So it's kind of a pretty comprehensive one. It looks at traditional aspects and it also looks at non-traditional aspects. But I think from a cyber resilience perspective, we have a lot of isolation from our vendor networks. So in case of an attack, it's more looking at our networks more internally as well. But we are starting to spend a lot more time on these aspects with our vendor partners, in addition to the traditional elements as well.
Sure, because we all hear about the weakest link could be anywhere, and you are as good as the weakest link. And if that weak link is coming from your vendor side, your own control framework could still be compromised. Moving quickly, I have paucity of time. So this says, we are doing much better as compared to, a market. And overall, Indian organizations are outperforming as compared to other countries that responded. Any surprising fact? We are responding faster and we are confident that our arrangements are better. Is this because we have got global controls, large organizations having higher environment?
I would just say we've been lucky, right? So it's just a matter of when the kitty, as Sumit was mentioning, it's all about the money kind of stuff, right? And that data and the money becomes bigger and larger. That's where the impact may be harder.
Yeah, because 90%, 91% people feel that our own arrangement, business continuity arrangements, can take care of cyber disruptions as well. So
that statement I would doubt.
RFP response?
Yeah. I think it's being a little over optimistic, because that whole space itself is evolving. I would really like to ask that question again after Wanakara and Petia to the organizations that were impacted would have probably said yes at that point of time. They would definitely change their response now.
Sure. Okay.
One point, Vikrant, that we might want to consider is, given the number of services companies in India where the contracts are very rigidly defined in terms of what is expected of the companies, there could genuinely be a scenario where companies in India are slightly better prepared than counterparts in the West, right? If you have an outsourcing arrangement, you better take care of these kind of crises, because one incident is all it will take for them to lose confidence in you.
Indeed.
So it is possible. It may be a scenario where we are marginally better than the firms in the West because of the kind of work we are doing.
I agree to a certain extent, because offshoring organizations take higher control, and that could be because of the anti-offshoring environment which we had in past. So that could be a valid response also, and the difference is only 4%, so we are not talking about large. This is a slide which talks about.
Especially for banking, right? If you see the way banking system, ecosystem in India is even app transaction, they are much mature than most of the Western and European countries.
Agree with you.
One of the reasons you get so much case numbers.
Good, okay. Validation of our plans against cybersecurity. So a lot of people said we regularly conduct exercises on likely scenario. We run desktop scenarios, our output and action plans are good, we have awareness seminars. Now, this is a question where we are saying 68% people are actually running scenarios. And I would like to ask, open question to you, is this reflective of reality? Have we started doing, cyber scenarios in our BCP or crisis management exercise regularly?
Yeah, I think we definitely are. And I think that's not really so much a choice now than a necessity, because we really need to understand our preparedness. We need to get business on the table, make them aware of what their risks are, get all the stakeholders together like IT, ISR, all of them who play a part. So these kind of scenarios are very necessary right now.
So how many people in the room you would see a cyber scenario exercise not being conducted with the senior management in your company? And don't be shy if you have not conducted it, it's okay. Because there are still 32% which said we have not conducted. So it's only one hand raised. Everybody else has done a cyber scenario exercise in the organization? Really? Okay.
The other way around. How many of you actually have done and raise your hands?
Okay. How many of you have been part of that exercise where cyber scenario was conducted? Okay. That's a better question. I agree. Moving on. Okay. So I think I have got few more questions, and which is more, to ask from Sumit from the perspective of looking at the response and how soon can we recover from cyber incident. A lot of people said, our response is faster, but if I have to take it from response to recovery, can you talk about preparedness and our overall response cycle? What could be complexities around it?
Let's just take a simple case of ransomware, right? We saw a lot of organizations, maybe around 65% of them had 5,000 employees or more. Now imagine an organization like this was impacted by a ransomware attack. Something like, let's say, 20% of their endpoints are compromised. So that's 1,000 desktops, laptops down for a 5,000 people organization. For a 100,000 people organization, you have the number in front of you. Now, how quickly can that organization, let's assume they have taken care in terms of backups, all data is available. All they need to do is re-image the systems, recover the data from wherever they have stored it. How quickly can that be done for, let's say, 10,000 employees? You will run into certain limitations over there. Now, a lot of these organizations...
And if it's a DDoS attack, then your networks are already choked.
You're already choked, right? And with DDoS, there's only so much you can do. You sign up with Cloudflare, you sign up with Akamai. There are some things that you can do, but not much beyond that. Now, getting these 10,000, 15,000, whatever laptops back up and running, get their data back onto the systems, and then resume operations, it's going to be time consuming. But the very same organizations will have a recovery time objective of around 24 hours, 48 hours. In such scenarios, we are certainly underestimating the time, underestimating the time it will take and overestimating our capabilities. So specifically from cyber resilience perspective, it might be worthwhile going back to the drawing board and saying, can we really recover in the time that we have marked as a recovery time objective?
Are you suggesting a cyber RTO separately?
No. Let's not get another parameter. We already have RTO, MTPOD, you have too many of them around. But what I'm saying is, considering that in the future, we will have many more cyber security related incidents, which will impact continuity, maybe a relook at the numbers, or how do we better respond? You have a setup where hundreds of systems can be re-imaged quickly, their data can be recovered quickly. Something of that sort will be required in that case.
Sure. Sanjay, one more question. Considering these two people on your right are BFSI largely captive, but you run an organization where there are many clients, large operation. When an incident like that happen, and when there are limitations on response and recovery, and obviously your resources are challenged, have you also started facing how to prioritize which client to recover first and all of that?
Yeah.
And how do you manage?
Yeah, it's basically going back to our BS 25999 return to normalcy kind of stuff, right? So when do we get back to normalcy? And the day most of the clients are not interested on the how you get it. It's more about more and faster, right? It's all about when do I get 100% and when do I get it within the shorter period of time kind of stuff. So it is looking at all those possibilities of how we can enable it, whether it's through India, through other countries, or through other vendors that we could leverage that as providers to look at all alternative strategies to get it up. But again, it is a challenging opportunity.
Sure. Sai, last question before I wind it up. Are you seeing any empowerment from the board to IT and information security team to deal with it differently within the main organization as well as with the extended contracts with vendors? Something different?
I think definitely, because I think this is a focus area for both the organization and also the outsourcing partnerships that we have. And ultimately, I think it's always a risk versus cost equation, right? I mean, the fact is that ultimately you have to make an assessment of what is the risk of this happening. I mean, we all talked about that it's more a question of when, but I think it's also about, what is the investment required to make sure you are able to recover, or do you need to think of, for want of a better thing, manual procedures to really recover? So.
Great. Thank you for all the responses. Big rounds for them. 3 of them have come from different cities, Bangalore, Bombay, and Bangalore. So it's good that they are spending their time and coming and joining us for this session. Thank you for accepting our invite to join and giving these enriching thoughts and inputs. Okay, my job done.
Thank you, Vikrant. And may I request Shrikant to give away a small token of appreciation to the speakers, please.
And a group photo. I hope I could recover some time. आगे आ जाइए.
Thank you, gentlemen.